We come to issues related to the situation around Ukraine. The Kiev regime, of course, is mainly due to its own military failure. Well, most importantly, Bandera continues to retaliate against Russia by carrying out terrorist attacks on its civilian population based solely on its own nature.
Продолжает мстить России, совершая против ее жителей и гражданских объектов террористические атаки. Бандеровцы
To carry out terrorist attacks against innocent, unarmed women of children.
женщин, детей.
It uses Western weapons, including American missiles.
Включая американские ракеты. Атакамс, Хармс, британо-французские Storm Shadow, Scalp,
and so on. Antonio, London, and other Western capitals, all those who are usually so sympathetic to civilians and defend human rights in awe, all of this is not something they can't see, but they can even see it very well because they provide it all.
Все это не то, что не видят, а видят даже очень хорошо, ведь они же это все поставляют.
Now they are simply cowardly declaring that Zelensky is not involved in the brazen terror against Russian civilians, but at the same time, they say it is clear that the Kiev regime will set its own goals. They will be attacked by Western weapons. In fact, the Kiev war did not hide where the intelligence came from, where the satellite images came from, who was preparing the corresponding attack, and in fact approved its implementation. Now, although timid, the Western media have begun to write about it. For example, on May 20th, this is the Wall Street Journal. The publication reported that the Ukrainian Nazis asked the Biden administration to help identify targets in Russia that could be attacked at high altitude, including weapons supplied by SHA. But the West is not only encouraged by the Kiev regime, so to speak, although the word encouragement is hardly appropriate, it still means the existence of the soul, but it can be said that the West is certainly an incentive organ for the Kiev regime's crimes. We've been talking about this and the fact that Westerners are actually gunners for the Bs and other formations in the ranks controlled by the Kiev regime. But now Western journalists are beginning to notice this, no matter what efforts they make. On the bank of Kiev regime or its Anglo-Saxon masters. Take the situation on the combat line of contact. I believe that the Russian armed forces are simply unable to solve the tasks set out in the framework of special military operations. Russian law enforcement agencies have carefully documented the crimes of Ukrainian neo-Nazis. Today we will talk about this separately, and none of the atrocities committed by the Kiev regime have been ignored, and those involved are being identified and brought to justice. It will continue to be so. I would like to say a few words about the anniversary of the liberation of Arkhomovsky Mariupol on May 20th, which we have celebrated 2 memorable days in our modern history. They are related to the liberation of the landmark cities of Mariupol in 22 and Arkhomovsky in 23. In the past 2 years, a lot of work has been done to rebuild Mariupol, where, as you may recall, 2/3 of the buildings, including the housing stock, have been destroyed. The work is ongoing. Today, the city is like a large construction site, and a new one has been opened. An industrial park with a sidewalk is being built on the streets, traffic, cars, urban services, and public transport. By the way, trams and buses are open with the support of St. Petersburg, and there is historical symbolism in it. The fact is that in 1942, it was Mariupol who helped launch trams in besieged Leningrad.
В этом есть исторический символизм. Дело в том, что в 1942 году именно Мариуполь помог осуществить пуск трамвая в блокадном Ленинграде.
The revival of the Pearl of Azov, rightly regarded as Mariupol, is encouraging. Really. Every month, more and more Mariupol residents are forced to leave their hometowns and return home, but the proximity of the shelling line of contact in the forest hinders the full recovery of Arkhomovsk. Nevertheless, the city is being cleared and energy and food supplies have been established. The DR authorities plan to start construction as soon as the military situation permits. Currently in the DNR-LNR Kherson, Zaporizhzhia region. Restoration and construction of 170 apartment buildings and more than 350 housing and public services. 24 years of energy, administrative, social, cultural, and domestic use. As you know, a plan has been approved to restore and build more than 5,000 new facilities. The Donbass Green Point and the Zaporizhia Kherson region has been restored by our people. You know, after Hitler's occupation in the 41st to 44th centuries of the 20th century, it is a pity that nearly 80 years later they experienced the horrors of Nazism again and suffered at the hands of Nazism. Modern fascists, but we believe that with the help of the whole country they will not be able to heal their wounds quickly. They'll be even more beautiful, but now, with regard to punishment, the courts of the Russian Federation continue to sentence Ukrainian militants who have committed serious crimes against civilians on the basis of evidence from the Russian Commission of Inquiry, which is inevitably related to the heinous crimes committed by the Kiev regime. Ukrainian commander Kanatov Tsimbal was sentenced in absentia to 28 and 20 years in prison, respectively, July-September 2019. Ignatov, his subordinates opened fire on the settlement, DPR Telmanovsky and Novosevsky districts. As a result, on 25th of April, 22 Kimball was shelled in the village of Nizhnaya Volna, killing the inhabitants and causing extensive damage to residential buildings. Both were placed on the most wanted list on May 16th. Alexander Bastrikin, Pfalz-Gobel of the Russian Investigative Committee, held a headquarters operational meeting in Luhansk to investigate crimes committed by Russian soldiers against civilians in the Zaporizhia and Kherson regions. A report was submitted on the Kiev regime's high-profile crimes against human peace and security. Although they took place in Donbass for a long time, the Commission of Inquiry will continue to identify and bring to justice all those involved. The investigation also focused on numerous evidence of the involvement of mercenaries from different countries on both sides. The head of the Russian Investigative Committee has directed continued work to document the crimes of neo-Nazis in Ukraine and determine the extent of the damage they have caused. Here, despite all the above, despite the tourism behavior of the Kiev regime, despite the complete opposition of Russia to them, and the opposition to this dehumanization is precisely creation. Although it is clear that everyone involved in terrorist attacks and other crimes by the Kiev regime will now be punished. The West is trying in some way, with the last strength, show some support for the same course. I wouldn't even call it political. On May 20th, the next 22 meetings of the contact group were held by emergency video conference to provide what they call Ramstein-style defense assistance to Ukraine. The reason is that the Kiev regime has alarmingly called for urgent and large-scale military aid, mainly air defense systems and various ammunition. The issue of the use of the $2 billion trench allocated by Washington, announced by Secretary of State CS in Kiev on May 15th, has been raised, and Ukraine has now been given the green light to deploy defense orders in 3 countries, not just the United States. This shows that Americans, following Europeans, are facing a wave of even, so to speak, the flow and appeal of the Kiev regime. How do you get them out anyway? He's from another world. They are also facing the ceiling of the possibility of their military-industrial complex, trying to find a way out, attracting foreign partners to support the Zelensky regime in production resources, and maintaining the declining morale of the military-industrial complex. It was clear that Pentagon Chief Chloe Costin had promised that they would take measures to ship almost weekly with HA. Ukraine needs a broad basis for military products. However, judging from what happened there during the formal meeting, Ramstein felt that no one among the Kiev regime's allies believed in his success at all. No one is ready for a new dangerous escalation. No one is ready to take responsibility for what is happening. As a result, the meeting did not bring any sensational breakthrough decisions, nor did it bring the despair of sending foreign military contingents by banks. NATO's defense of Ukraine's skies from Russian missiles has not been realized. But the Kiev regime is trying to get in from different angles. They take every opportunity to show the West their commitment to the so-called Western values, which violates the logic of historical truth and common sense. Here's another example. May 18th marks the 80th anniversary of the forced expulsion of Crimean Tatars from Crimea. The Kiev regime has not shied away from using this tragic page in the history of its people for propaganda purposes. On this day, another memorial monument was laid in Kiev. Is that what you imagine? To the people who liberated the Ukrainian people, Ukraine itself from the Nazis, to these people, to the leaders, to the public figures, the monuments are being demolished. History is being rewritten before our eyes, and the monuments and memories of the great patriotic war are being distorted from their historical point of view. They are given new meanings by reimagining, but you see what is really barbaric. But in Ukraine, as usual, Zelensky erected a new monument at the ceremony, absolutely theatrical. Well, how did he talk about terror? How did he describe Russia's occupation of the peninsula? However, the role of a jealous defender of minority rights is jealous, although he couldn't tell all his high school gifts. It all looked like a lie, because everyone knew exactly what it was about. Against the backdrop of systematic and massive violations of human rights, these rights are being destroyed in principle on Ukrainian territory. During Zelensky's reign, against the backdrop of systematic and massive violations of the rights of ethnic minorities, millions of citizens of the country were destroyed. Russian is a show-off concern. This is the awe of the connection with the situation of individual ethnic, cultural, and religious groups. She looks hypocritical. No one believes it.